Glad to know you're still with us on Nigeria Decides on Plus TV Africa. We're continuing the conversation, but before we do that, we have our correspondent at INEC office in Yaba, Lagos. He's going to give us an update on what's going on around there. Expectedly, we want to know what the results are. Udoka, are you with us?
Yeah, hello, good evening.
Good evening. How is it around Yaba right now?
Well, security operatives all over the place and nothing is happening here. Yeah, exactly. And talking about the collation of results, it hasn't started. And I spoke with the domestic observer. He said one of the reasons why it hasn't started, he's not even sure if it's going to start tonight because some local government areas are yet to start collating their own results.
Okay. Sorry, Udoka, you were mentioning security officials all over the place. Why do you think that's the situation?
I didn't get you.
Why do you think there's so many security officials on ground?
Hello?
Can you hear
me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, Ekene, you're talking to Ekene now. And I'm asking Udoka, why do you think there's so many security officials around?
Yeah, of course. They are trying to stay alert in case anything goes wrong, but of course it's a normal procedure. Yeah.
Do you know at this moment if all the polling units have been brought in?
If what?
If most of the polling unit results are coming in?
Not yet, because the observer I spoke with, he said specifically in Koshofe local government, or Jota Nogudu to be precise, he said that the elections did not start until about 3 p.m.
Okay. What's the general feel there right now? Aside the tension, is there a sense of panic or everywhere is just like tensed, waiting for results or tensed, scared?
It's actually empty. We're just waiting for the INEC officials to get here because the results are not in yet.
Okay, Udoka, you must have spoken to some people while you're waiting. Can you hear me?
Hello?
Yes, can you hear me, Udoka?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, I'm assuming you've spoken to some people whilst you're waiting.
There's no INEC official on ground. It is just an observer that I've spoken with. Okay. The INEC officials are yet to arrive.
Okay, do you have a sense of how long you may have to wait before things get moving?
Well, from the observer I spoke with, he said during the presidential election they had to be here for 3 days. So I'm not sure if this will happen tonight, but we're still keeping watch and hopefully something will happen tonight.
All right, thank you very much, Udoka. We'll get back to you as soon as we can. All right, that's from our reporter on the field. No results as of yet. They're still waiting. Security on the ground. What do you make of that? Let me come to you, Lou.
Well, I'm happy there's security there because I think with elections in Nigeria to be precise, the two maybe flashpoints or where potential flashpoints are when the votes are actually being cast and when they're being collated. So I'm happy that there are security officials there. We've seen stories of INEC staff, a lot of things that happen in terms of violence towards INEC staff usually happens when the collation is happening because that's when they intimidate them, force them to quote unquote declare results or declare someone the winner and those sorts of things. So hopefully we don't see those things when the results start coming in, but fingers crossed.
Okay, before we ask any further question, let me quickly welcome our guest, Mayowa Idowu, public affairs analyst. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
Right on the hot seat. What's your reaction
to what Udoka said?
Yes.
I agree with Lonu that I think it's important that the collation process is kept, its sanctity is kept, because that's where we know in terms of manipulation, those are the areas where they are most open to manipulation. So if you have a situation where there's heavy security, we can kind of see and understand why. Obviously, we hope this is not something that lasts a couple of days. Like by tomorrow, we should kind of have an idea.
Hopefully.
We should kind of have an idea of what is happening. And then I think another thing he said that kind of caught my attention was the fact that some polling units on the mainland started at 3 o'clock. That, I think, is unacceptable. I don't think... It's almost like the people are being deliberately disenfranchised, because I don't see what reason or excuse INEC have to have started things that late.
I mean, even referring back to the presidential elections and the collation process there, I think most people felt it was sluggish, to put it mildly. So is there any explanation for why we have to wait so long after the event has taken place before we get the results announced?
No, I think there's an element of it that is being extra careful, I think, which is good. But then there's the element of it, the other element of it is the delays. So if you have elections that are meant to start at 8, but they're not starting till 3 o'clock, obviously there will be delays in the collation. If you have elections starting even an hour or 2, 3 hours after they're supposed to, if you have elections where for whatever reason there are security challenges, again, you're going to have those sorts of delays. If you have a situation like I think it was in Imo, and in 2015 it was in Rivers, where the collation offices were surrounded by mobs of people, in some cases security forces, I think that they were trying to keep peace, to be fair. So those things prolong what should really be a simple process of just counting results. But again, we're hoping that that's not the case here. We haven't seen a lot of results come in. I think I saw some from some states, but we haven't seen, I think in Lagos specifically, we haven't seen that many coming in. But we're all hoping that whenever that happens, it happens seamlessly. It doesn't take 3 days. I think
like you said,
the presidential elections, we had the election on Saturday. The winner wasn't declared, I think, until Wednesday morning.
Yes,
Hopefully that doesn't happen.
To that. Well, it's still talking about INEC and the situation coming up. Earlier in the conversation, when we started this last evening batch of the conversation on Nigeria Decides, we were talking about violence not being as much as during the presidential and National Assembly election. But since we went on a break and came back, we've had so much information. In Kogi State, for instance, we heard that 6 INEC staff were abducted and subsequently released. That story was carried by the Punch newspaper. Election observers was also shot dead in Enugu. This is from the police, carried by Vanguard. And 2 security personnel were killed. 20 INEC staff, 20 were abducted in Katsina State, in one local government area. And of course, we also heard that in Delta State, during the collation of results at a polling unit, gunmen opened fire, but we do not know if any person has died. There seemed to be, as the thing is, coming down at the twilight, some escalation in violence. Are you worried about that? Let me come to you, Maiwa.
Am I worried about it? I think there's no way you can hear of this type of incident and not be worried about it. But I also think we understand that this is kind of how it works, because as he said earlier on, the 2 flashpoints in terms of the election process are, it's either they come and they snatch the ballot boxes and stuff them, or they start towards the end, when it's clear the will of whoever is perpetrating the violence has not been done. It's to kind of to manipulate the people involved doing that. So I think I understand that it's part of the is as
to be expected.
Yes, I guess it's to be expected. But I think what we have to do, and what for me the take home is, we have to kind of increase the security and the scrutiny surrounding that process, because I don't think it can happen if there's extra scrutiny, if there's extra security around the
sorry,
process.
I know I seem to be interrupting you, but are we not trying to have our cake and eat it? When we speak of having a military presence, we all say, that's wrong. But perhaps our democracy is not mature enough to do without that kind of a sort of presence when it comes to elections.
Yeah, it's almost a chicken and egg situation, because I think Felicity asked me yesterday on the show what I thought about almost the militarization of the election sometimes. And I think on Friday, there was a report in one of the newspapers saying that the Air Force had said we're ready for the elections. we have what's it called, attack helicopters on standby,
Man.
and that's supposed to reassure the public in terms of security. But as a voter, that would scare me, to be honest, because it's an election, it's not a war. So I'm not sure you deploy attack helicopters in war zones, not for elections. But on the flip side of that, we have so much violence that happens in our elections that the police, what ordinarily should be the job of the police, has to be supplemented in some cases by the military. And that's our reality as a nation. It's something we can't hide from, something we can't shy away from. I wish it wasn't that way. You're right when you say that maybe our democracy is not mature enough. It isn't. Because if you have cases like the ones you read out where people are getting killed,
Abducted?
INEC staff are getting abducted, INEC staff are being forced to read results that are not right. Where you have, these should not be happening. And I think you're absolutely right that if you increase security around these areas, around these people, that would probably reduce. But again, not being an INEC insider, I don't know if those conversations have happened about increasing security and doing those sorts of things. But the fact that we're still having these sorts of issues means that something in terms of security that should be happening isn't happening. If you're at a polling unit in Delta, where someone just came, opened fire, for the last 2 days, we saw what had been happening in Akwa Ibom, bombs going off, INEC offices getting burned, people getting shot, all because it's all leading to an election. So we can't see all that and then say we don't want the military involved, because the military has to be involved, in my opinion, because the police is stretched. That's the reality. We have civil defense, but these guys are stretched.
But let me also ask Mayowa, sometimes in other climes you find that people are monitoring, like maybe in the UK, where you have certain figures are likely to cause problems. They're being monitored in advance. And when you look at INEC, he says the police are stretched. INEC too seem to be stretched a bit.
Yeah.
Is there no other way or other agencies could come alongside INEC and monitor these people in advance? Because we're looking at prevention, so that you don't have to come with a military presence and frighten the voters.
I understand what you're saying, but I think there's a problem with that, because it's almost like it's like arresting people before they commit a crime, or monitoring them before they commit a crime, because it's like, how do you, if someone came and said, oh, they wanted to monitor me 2 days before the elections.
They can do it covertly. They don't need to come to you or let you know that you're, because we know that in situations.
How do you know who to monitor?
No, you see, because
that's where intelligence gathering comes in.
And also because a lot of times, thank you, Felicity, a lot of times people say these people didn't send themselves. So clearly there's someone behind the scenes. Yeah. That's the person to monitor.
Yeah, but here's the problem, right? If you're determined to cause chaos in a state, you're not necessarily going to use people in the state to cause the chaos. There were I saw a video with buses of people, I don't know if the narration in the video was true or not, but they were going to a state and they were coming from another state, right? And this is something I think it's almost an obvious tactic, because to digress for a second, when President Trump was talking about building his wall, I remember an American lady that lives close to the border was saying she doesn't think it will work, because if you build a 20-foot wall, someone will get a 21-foot ladder. So even if we start monitoring the people that we think are troublemakers in the states, all they have to do is import troublemakers from other states.
Sorry, let me just emphasize, we're not monitoring the people at the grassroots. We're monitoring the people behind those people who are sending them.
Yeah, but they're not stupid. If someone is going to pay someone to do stuff, he's not going to do it directly. And if you're going to monitor him, you're not monitoring him to the point that you know every conversation he's having. So it could be having 100 conversations that have nothing to do with that. That one that has to do with that might be the one that the monitoring misses, unless you know exactly who he's talking to that has anything to do with that. If, then that's a separate conversation. But I think my issue more than anything is we need to get to a point where, and when I say we, in this case, where I'm talking about the electorate and people that are not directly involved in running for office, we need to get to a point where someone paying you money to go and do certain things, either to stuff ballot boxes, to snatch ballot boxes, to cause violence or whatever it is, you can't accept that money, do those things, and then come back and complain about the way the country is. Because you are part of why the country is the way it is. And it gets on my nerves a little bit because people, you do these things. This has nothing, yeah, INEC has a security responsibility, yes. But these acts that are being carried out, there's nothing INEC can do about it. Because even if we put processes in place, even if we do all these things and we say, okay, yes, INEC dropped the ball here, maybe they should do X and X, there's a human factor that INEC or any other organization cannot deal with.
Perhaps you're lumping the hooligans together a bit too much, because if you say, oh, you can't go and complain, you're presuming that the person who is taking that money is really reasoning along those lines. That person may just be thinking the country is going down, I'll take what I can. So maybe that person needs a different kind of deterrence. That's really what I'm saying.
Deterrence in Nigeria is, unfortunately, a lot of the time is just a nice word. Because as long as there are no consequences for bad behavior, these things won't stop. It's that simple.
No, that's even having. I think we do have consequences, but the implementation, the process of getting
it done. When I say consequences, how many? Let me ask you this: how many people do you know that have perpetuated election-related violence? How many have you heard being charged to court and being in prison?
Exactly.
That's what I mean by no consequences. Yes. So the laws are there, obviously.
Yes.
But
it's not seen to be.
Exactly. There's no disincentive. If I know that if I go and burn these ballot boxes, I'm going to get away with it, fine, I'll go and do it because I know nothing's going to happen.
Yeah, but you're a legal, you come from that legal background. Yeah. So, even looking at a specific case of Okorocha in Imo State, and everybody was informed that or someone alleged that he came and under duress made them. Why has nothing been done about that?
Well, it's a part of it is INEC's internal processes, because I think it was the rec for Imo State that made that allegation. Yeah. So as far as I'm aware, he needs to make an official report to INEC saying that this happened.
Can he not be disqualified in the meantime?
Okorocha? Yes. No, the result has been declared. So the only way that anything can change is if the opponent goes to the election tribunal and says this is what happened and provides proof that this is what happened. That's unfortunate.
In the meantime,
if it actually happened, I don't think it sounds like it's just like mere process.
Allegation.
Yeah, it's an allegation. But if there's actual evidence, it just looks like it's something that's like a slam dunk.
There has to be proof that it happened. You can't just, anybody can say anything.
Here, you have one, you lawyers are not helping matters.
That's where I was going.
And you have the other one here. Why one is trying to prove this one wrong, this one is trying to prove this one wrong. And the situation gets a little more complicated, and people that are not supposed to be where they are, they're there. I mean, where does that leave us, really?
Yeah, but those things are in place for a reason. It prevents abuse, because you can't just say this person did something to me. You have to be able to show that, yes, okay, this is evidence and proof are not the same thing.
But
right?
Actually,
you come out and say that this is evidence that he forced me to read the results on that duress. Well, does that evidence then lead to incontrovertible proof that this is what happened? In some cases, him saying that I'm reading this result on that duress because I want to see my children. I think I remember that from the audio. Him saying that is one thing. But unless he can actually show that this is, and don't get me, it's a high bar. It's a very high bar.
Let me say something. It's a very high bar. You're just saying exactly what I'm saying. One lawyer on one side proving you right, the other side. Okay. Because I had a similar situation. I had a burden of proof. I was almost beating a crowd of people. There were lots of people there. But at the end of the day, I did not have any evidence to say this is the person or that is the person. I cannot say, I cannot hold any particular person responsible, but the event actually happened.
Can I ask you a
I was
question?
traumatized. I was almost lynched.
Can I ask you a question?
Go
The
ahead.
tables are turned.
What if, imagine it, and I'm not diminishing that scenario, but imagine a scenario where, Maiwa and I get into an argument. I don't like Maiwa, Maiwa doesn't like me. Because of that, I said, I'm going to teach Maiwa a lesson. So I go out there and I say, oh, this happened to me, and it was Maiwa that did it. Maiwa had nothing to do with it.
Exactly the point I'm trying
So,
to make.
but-
The burden of proof, in some cases, whether we like to acknowledge it or not,
Yeah, but you
does
can't
not
just
always
accuse
play.
someone. You can't
It's not
you
just
can't-
accusation. See, it doesn't always play in favor of the truth, because the person who has evidence, so to speak, and you that the event, I mean, we all see these things happen on a daily basis.
Yes,
but you
but-
don't have evidence. So that's just
Yeah,
what
but
I'm
you
saying.
have to have, you can't
Yes,
just
fair
say,
enough.
you have to have evidence.
How do you have evidence when the thing happened and you
So
were compelled?
how does a judge then make it, okay, you're standing here, you say, this happened to me, and this person is saying, well, I didn't see anything. How does the judge decide
So
if
does
there's
that
no proof?
does that invalidate the fact
No, it
that
doesn't invalidate, it
that's my
just-
point exactly.
Invalidating
It's
and no
just that
proof
it
are two
cannot be
different things.
Sorry, maybe you can clarify this issue.
That's
Yeah, if
for
it
us.
can't be proved, then there's nothing. The judge's hands are tied if it can't be proved.
Our situation is really
It's
terrible.
Sorry, bear with me. I just want to ask again. If I understood rightly, there was something innovative that happened to do with burden of proof along the lines of elections, and I think there was a shift where the accused is now required to. I want you to clarify that for me. To do with the elections, because I feel that if that's true, then someone is thinking about how we can change the dynamics and maybe
So I
make
will
things more
prove
efficient, because
that-
otherwise the law is just like a toothless dog.
No, see, the issue of burden of proof, I can. Don't
Can
get
you
me wrong,
verify
I'm not-
there's such a change? Has
Not
taken
as far as I'm aware.
Okay.
Not as
I'll
far.
have
It
to
might
go
be,
back
but
to
not,
It's
not
a
as far as
conversation
it's something.
that's
It's something I was
ongoing.
checking.
It's
Not as far as I'm
not,
aware.
yeah.
Okay.
But I can. Don't get me wrong. I understand exactly what you're saying. I'm just trying to say that there's the general principle of the law in terms of criminal law is innocent until proven guilty.
Beyond reasonable doubt.
So you can accuse someone of murder.
Exactly.
If you cannot prove that this person actually did it, all it is an
It's mere
accusation and
accusation.
an allegation. That's the reality. And as painful as that sounds in some, I mean, the INEC chairman that was saying they forced him under duress, I have my suspicions that it's probably true.
Okay.
But the reality is, if he cannot prove it,
That's my
that's
point.
where it ends.
And
It's
the
not
wrong
going to
people
go
will
beyond
continue
that.
because these people are also smart. They know that the burden of proof is not on them, but the person that's making the allegation.
But
So
do you know
if-
that one of these guys can lie, that something happened to him? I'm not saying he's lying, don't get me wrong, but
Nothing stops him from doing
people can make up things, and that's why the position of the law is you need to be able to prove it. You can't just say, I can't just say Maiwa did this to me. I have to be able to show them the
Okay,
evidence
the
that he
case of
actually
this
did it.
abducted lawyer, let's take my situation out of the picture, even though the police compelled me to delete my evidence, right? Now, if you go to the case in, I think, Nasarawa, where the young man was taking pictures of underage children, and he was abducted, and those pictures deleted. He told his story, but somehow he was able to retrieve 1 or 2 pictures to back as evidence. But
that's
what if
proof.
he hadn't? What if he had not found those pictures as proof and say this happened?
Then
That
it's
means
gone.
his abduction and the whole scenario. That's my worry. That so long as we continue to have situations like this,
But it's not unique to
people-
Nigeria.
Yeah.
I know
happens
it's
in-
not.
It's the same everywhere.
But it's unfortunate
It
because
is, it
if
is.
it is true that this he was forced under, going back to the Imo State situation, that it was under duress that he took that decision to announce the result.
Yeah.
The wrong person is in the position.
Yes.
Somebody has been disenfranchised.
Yes.
But because we cannot prove it, nothing
But I was
can
even
be
going to
done.
add to that. I know I really want to hear what you have to say. But I was going to add to that, could we not envisage a situation where, because of the seriousness of the allegation, at least suspend the person until that, because the risk, it's quite a risky situation, if you permit that person to continue in that position, knowing that such a strong allegation has been made against them.
I think Mayo, I should just take it up.
Okay. to the larger point, I think what we have to remember and acknowledge is that where the law comes from is there's a process. So I feel like what we're trying to recommend is to beat the process. I think the law should always take its due course in terms of go to the election petition tribunal. Let the judges there, let them determine whether you have proved what you have to prove beyond reasonable doubt, whether you can actually say, oh, this happened and there's evidence to corroborate it. But when I think it's like we are basically legislating what if.
No, but these are conversations that we sometimes it's when you talk about evidence and talk about things that actually happen, they are two different things entirely. So if you don't have evidence, it's a conversation we should have. Having it, there's nothing wrong. We're not saying that the laws should change. We're just saying that, it's possible that someone will be disenfranchised because the person does not have evidence. It is possible.
Yeah, it is.
Yes, but it doesn't mean that we are saying that the person should be put in place because he has some moral grounds for the accusation. Anyway, I think we should maybe shift the conversation a little to some other issues. The National Assembly, some National Assembly elections were rescheduled to hold alongside this state and House of Assembly election. But so far today, we've all been focused on the states and States House of Assembly. Nobody seemed to have information on the National Assembly elections now. And even some cases, some places where the result has come, they said some places were cancelled with the delay in the announcement of the results and coming in for the states. Do you see us even getting a response on those grounds? Let me come to you, Lulu.
Well, when you say a response, what do you mean?
Like results. So far, we're still having troubles getting results for the states and State House of Assembly elections. Okay,
so well, first, in terms of the presidential elections in certain areas that were cancelled, or senatorial or House of Reps, it makes sense that the focus has shifted from that to the state elections, the state houses of assembly, because that's where that's the bulk of today's elections. I think in terms of the presidential one, no one's really paying attention anymore, to be honest, because the margin of President Buhari's victory was about 3.9 million votes or something like that. If all the cancelled elections were suddenly won by the PDP, it would not be enough to make up that margin. So most people have just forgotten about that and focused on the state elections. And then I think the PDP is in court now challenging the presidential election results. So that's where the focus is as far as that's concerned. In terms of the results coming in, I'm just hoping it doesn't take 3 days to announce the results. I think that's probably my main worry. But because this is state by state now, as opposed to a presidential one that is decided by this number of states, hopefully we start to get the ones for each state, hopefully maybe later tonight or tomorrow morning.
You actually feel we'll have some results because...
Well,
we're still hoping
we hope so, because I don't like conspiracy theories. So I have a fear that if this starts going into tomorrow morning, then you start hearing things about maybe they're manipulating things.
So I'm not saying,
exactly, just do it, get it out of the way, and kill all those arguments.
Well, we're still hoping we will get in touch with our correspondents at Yaba. Hopefully, we'll get some sort of update on what's happening over there at the INEC office. But until we do, the conversation continues here with our guests.
Yes, and just as you were talking, I was thinking I wanted to hear from both of you. Do you feel on the balance of things that the elections have been credible this time around? Has the process satisfied you sufficiently for you to say, well, depending on what is announced over the next few hours, we should be able to live with it?
From my perspective, yes. I think in the presidential elections, we had we had episodes in Lagos where there were thugs basically snatching ballot boxes, sending people back. So there was a lot of, I think, voter suppression. But now I think that has evolved into apathy. So today, a lot of people didn't come out. When I voted in the presidential elections, I think I left my house maybe at like 10. I didn't get back till like 1 because the queues were long. There were a lot of people there. Today, I left my house and I was back in 20 minutes.
Yes.
Because
It took me 5 minutes.
Yeah, we
Everywhere was
noticed that
free.
as well in our movement around town
Yeah.
today. That was very prominent. You want to share your
Yeah,
thoughts?
I think I agree with that because yes, there were irregularities here and there, but again, in our context, that's expected. But were there irregularities
on a large scale.
on the scale that it would have altered what the results were? I don't think so. So
Okay.
on that basis, I would say it's
More credible.
it is more credible.
But could you envisage a situation where people could complain and say it's not representative and therefore not credible? In the sense that if it's a minority of people decided for the majority, then
Well,
How
I mean, if you
democratic
think
is
about
that?
the fact that, okay, if you use Lagos as an example, 5 million PVCs were collected in Lagos, but only 1 million people voted. So what we're essentially saying is that 20% of eligible in the sense that they collected PVCs, decided the election results for Lagos State. That if you don't factor in the cancelled results in those places. So on that basis, yes, I get that argument. But on the other side, there is the question of why we had 5 million PVCs collected and only 20% of people came out to vote
Showed
in the
up.
first place.
yes.
So there's, again, I don't know
another
the
discussion.
answer to that question, but that's a question to be asked. And it's a worrying thing. I think I said on the show yesterday that my fear for Lagos isn't violence, it's voter turnout. Because remember that if you look from 1999 till 2019, the voter turnout numbers have been sort of going up and down. But I think 2019 is one of the lowest, which I think was just under 40%, if I remember correctly,
Okay.
which is quite low because we have, according to INEC anyway, we have about 84 million registered voters in Nigeria. And I think President Buhari's number, according to INEC, was about 15 million. Alhaji Atiku Abubakar was about 11 million. So that's what, 26 million. So that's not even, so
Not
when
up to
you,
half.
exactly, it's not up to half.
But I'm just curious, like you
So-
say your fear for Lagos is not violence. Because in my mind, maybe I had constructed this idea that because Lagos is such a stronghold of a particular party,
Yeah.
if things didn't go their way, I can't imagine that they'll take it lying down.
Yeah, but the reality for me with Lagos is almost a foregone conclusion.
Okay.
That's my personal opinion in terms of what the
Not
results would
likely
be.
to go any other way.
And
It's
you
not-
will
it's
tempt
not-
me to ask you the question, what's the point of voting if it is concluded?
That is, yeah. So
yes,
that,
I keep asking you that question, remember yesterday?
Yeah, so
my
this
goodness.
is remember that's why I said that's one of the reasons for voter apathy, because you don't think your
Can't
result
envisage a
makes
revolution.
anything. And the irony of this is it's a dangerous way of thinking. Don't get me wrong, because I look at part of what happened in 2016 in the U.S. elections. A lot of people didn't vote because they assumed Hillary Clinton would win. So they just thought, well, what's the point? President Trump was elected by, I mean, if you look at, obviously they have the electoral college system, right? And whoever is going to be US president has to get 270 electoral college votes. But Hillary Clinton still won the popular vote by about 3 million votes. And what a lot of people didn't realize was that election was actually decided by 80,000 people across 3 states, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan. 80,000 people in those 3 states decided the election, because the assumption going into those elections were that Hillary Clinton was
done
going to
deal.
take those 3 states, but she didn't
So they
because of
didn't
those
come out
80,000.
very
Exactly.
So that
Because
just
they
might happen in
assumed-
Lagos.
That is America.
Will that happen in Lagos? I mean, I don't think it will, but the point
Might.
is it can happen. That's why I say it's a dangerous mindset, because that's not the only thing causing voter apathy, but I'm just saying that's a major reason. Then there's the fear of violence. There's the fact that, well, presidency is decided, I can't be bothered. There are all sorts of things. There's the issue of when I tried to vote at the presidential election, instead of voting at 8, I didn't vote until 3. So there are all those sorts of issues that come up. And so for a lot of people, they would rather just use that Saturday as a chill at home day rather than going out.
Yeah, I'm sure these states, Edo, Ondo, Ekiti, Bayelsa, Anambra, Osun, whose tenures are still on, wouldn't really have had so much issues, maybe aside from the State House for Assembly elections. But there's one thing I want us to touch on before we wrap things up here today, and that's the level of cancelled votes. We had a situation in Kaduna, I think, 18 polling units, which was cancelled at some point, citing security reasons and inaccessibility to location. Do you think that's valid enough? Is it strong enough at this point, especially with all the assurances we've received? I know that similar situation occurred in some parts of Nigeria, but that's where I do have data at the moment. So, I mean, with all the assurances and everything, should we be having the excuse that we couldn't access a particular location as reason enough to cancel elections in a particular location?
No, we should not. I think it's absurd that we're having this conversation. And I also think this goes to a larger point. I think we don't hold, or INEC are not accountable enough.
Okay.
These are things that in a corporate organization, something like that will form an appraisal issue where you've not done your job. Because if you can cancel, because you have 4 years to prepare for this. If on the day of the election you're telling us you're canceling 18 polling units because of lack of accessibility, it means you've just faffed in the last 4 years. So I think it's very wild to me that this is something, it's unforgivable. I don't think you can just wake up one morning and decide, oh.
But let me just ask, because people keep citing corporate organizations. Every time you sort of look at some of the shortcomings of INEC, how, I'm just trying to think, in our corporate organizations, is it not endemic in our corporate organizations that we don't hold ourselves accountable as well? We have systemic issues. We have issues with applying systems across board, I'm suggesting. And INEC is just,
symbolic of that?
Yeah, it's just, yeah.
Yeah, it is, because I'm dumbfounded, to be honest, that this is even possible. Because like I said earlier, Nigeria didn't grow bigger, right, in terms of landmass in the last 4 years, in the last 8 years. These local governments that we're talking about that were not accessible, how is it possible? Unless someone is telling me they've never been accessible, then that's a separate conversation. But if they've been accessible prior to 2019, how did that happen? And then how were they suddenly not accessible in 2019? So for me, it goes back to this question of how the planning for 2019 was done.
Well, I'm also looking ahead and saying, okay, we're learning lessons now, we're discussing issues. Yeah. Looking ahead, what role do we play as a people to hold INEC accountable going forward? Because I still see that we may be here in 4 years' time discussing recurring issues. And these are things that happen every day, not just within the INEC infrastructure. Yeah,
I mean, so he's right when he talks about, because this, I don't have a personal issue with the INEC chairman, but the reality is, if you're going to use the context of a corporate organization, if, let's say Nigeria was a project, okay, and INEC, the election and everything was a project being managed by, say, the managing director, who's the INEC chairman, he would have been fired for this conduct, for the way this, don't get me wrong, they've got stuff right in terms of, okay, yes, the election did happen, things happen and all this, but the things that they got wrong were so big that it calls into question.
But forgive me for laboring the point. Would he have been fired? Because I look around Nigeria, and if Nigeria was as efficient as we like to imagine,
a serious corporate organization. Maybe let's
not many of them. Then perhaps
a serious corporate mind. Because you can't. I mean, come on, you can't take over an organization that has made certain mistakes in the last 4, 8, 12 years, and then make exactly the same mistakes that they've made, and you think you've done a good job.
I mean, and you could actually say INEC have regressed in the last 4 years compared to.
Really?
That's
That's
interesting.
your
Yeah,
opinion.
you can say that.
I'm sure they would cry actual tears if they heard
So these
you
local,
right now.
I mean, I don't disagree with him because these local governments that they're saying it was
Inaccessible.
I don't even know how that's possible because
Maybe
I think
the
my
roads
first
got bad
question,
between now and...
my first question is, were they accessible in 2015? If they were, then what happened?
What's gone wrong?
What happened in 4 years? And if they were not accessible in 2015, you had 4 years to plan. So didn't you factor that into the planning? Which is why I keep saying I don't understand how the 2019 election was planned. I mean, we're talking about logistics. Nobody is diminishing the size of the logistical challenges. But again, I'll go back to the same thing. The logistical challenges were not new. None of them.
Except
were
that
new.
they said they had more registered voters this time around. So perhaps they were
Yeah,
dealing
but
with
that
more,
was
more
expected.
bodies.
That was expected.
Every 4 years, people come of age.
That was expected.
I honestly wish we can continue with this conversation, but I'm sure we'll continue tomorrow. For those that might not know, Nigeria Decides it's not ending. We've not had all the results in yet, so the conversation will certainly continue tomorrow right here. But for now, let's thank our guests who have been so kind to spend their time with us. We know you've been up all day. Thank you very much, Lolu Elegbe, Public Affairs Analyst. Thank you very much. Mayo Waido, Public Affairs Analyst as well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
And of course, how's it been for you?
It's been a pleasure, actually. I mean, I must say, it's been more relaxing this time around. It hardly feels like we had an election at all. But I'm not sure if I should be celebrating that or feeling that
Yeah, we
we've
don't
lost
have
out
results.
on something.
Yeah,
Yes,
some people got injured, some lost property, some lost money. We're just hoping that it shouldn't be as bad as some people are envisaging. We'll just get the results peacefully and everybody will move on with their life and do something else.
and hopefully move towards the next stage.
Yes, indeed. And some of these recurring issues that our guests have mentioned will not come again in another 4 years.
Exactly.
Pinkies crossed on
Exactly.
that one.
Exactly.
All right, for those that might have missed some of our shows, you can catch up on all the things we've done on Nigeria Decides Studio and Plus TV Africa on our YouTube page. That's at Plus TV Africa. Just type it on your search button and you will see all the details you need and catch up on the conversation that Lulu kept mentioning earlier that we had yesterday.
Previous, yeah.
I guess that's where we're going to pause today. Thank you very much.
It's
Tomorrow is
been a
another day. We will continue with the conversation on Nigeria Decides. My name is Felicity Ezewike.
And I am Ekene Ezeji. It's been a pleasure.